Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lesson on investing. First question is, what is an investment? Well, really, it is just something you buy that will be worth more later than it is now. So, essentially, things that go up in value. I've got a quick little video to show you guys about this from James Cunningham. Funny
Hey
Man.
guys, Funny Money Man here. You know, people are always emailing me asking how can they make money. Well, I'm going to give you one of the most powerful tips about money right here, right now. It's easy. Buy more stuff that makes money and buy less stuff that loses value. Let me show you what I mean. New sports car, money loser. Brand new designer sunglasses, money loser. White three-piece silk layout suit, big money loser. When I was dressed like that, I looked like I had a lot of money. But in reality, all these things depreciate in value. This brand new car lost 15 to 20% of its value the second I drove it off the lot. If I tried to sell it, I would not get what I paid for it because now it's used. Make a list of all the things that you own. Shoes, DVDs, an iPod, clothes, a computer, a gaming system, maybe even a big screen TV. What do all these things have in common? I'll give you time to think about it. Time's up! That's right. They're all money losers that decrease in value over time. An investment, on the other hand, is something that increases in value over time. A mutual fund, money maker. A savings bond, money maker. A high interest savings account, money maker. How many of these things do you have? Probably not many. Your long-term financial plan should include putting at least some of your money into things that increase in value. How easy is that? Now, I know what you're saying. Do I really have to worry about this right now? Well, yes! Because the younger you are when you start, the more time your investments have to increase in value. If you want to make money, you have to think long-term. Cool short-term things like cars and electronics, they look good at first, but they don't hold their value. So start building your long-term wealth by investing in long-term money makers. You see, I don't want you to wind up like my friend Jeff. I remember back when we were teenagers.
Hey man, I'm 18 years old. I'm living for today. Investing's for old people in their 40s.
Hey man, were you kissing my van, bro? This was the coolest thing on the road back in 1981. Yes, Jeff, but now you live in it.
So, couple of things. First of all, stocks and mutual funds. Essentially, the stock market is a place where you can buy and sell stocks. Now, the question is what is a stock? Well, really, it is just a piece of a company, right? So, if, for example, company X, in order to get cash to do its things, they'll sell off lots and lots and lots of little pieces. Each one of those is a stock, and I know I'm showing only 5 here, but the reality is that sometimes these are like thousands, hundreds of thousands of stocks maybe, so they're really tiny pieces of the company. And you can buy them, and as the company increases in value, and people want to buy your piece of the company, then you can sell it for a profit. It increased in value. The other thing that stocks will do is that they will sometimes pay dividends. Dividends are really just a portion of profits that go to each shareholder. The more shares you have, the more dividends you get. Right? Now, a mutual fund is a little bit different, but not quite so much. In the case of a mutual fund basically they will buy stocks from all sorts of different companies. So from this company and this company, and maybe let's just put 3 companies in here. Now, typically you'll see more like 20, 30, sometimes 50, or even more stocks in a mutual fund. Now, the mutual fund basically is a basket. It holds all these different companies of stocks, and all sorts of individuals can buy into this mutual fund. Right? Mutual fund means that it is a fund that is owned by many people. And so what a mutual fund does is essentially lets us have this big basket without having to pay the price of each individual stock, because that can get rather expensive. But it means that I can own a wide variety of stocks simply by just investing into a mutual fund. Now, if you own a mutual fund, there is always a little bit of a fee for their service, and that's how the company is making their money. But it's a way for people to invest, and is a very handy way for people to invest when they're just starting out, because they can wind up with a broad range of companies, and although one company may be going down, right, another company may be going up, and that limits your risk as things move along. Now, some places where you can go to invest money. First of all, banks. Now, they offer several products, including RSPs, RESPs. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. Purchasing of bonds can also be done here. But typically, most of the people at banks, they are really salespeople. They don't have a lot of investment. They're really just trying to sell their products. So if you know exactly what you want, this can be a good place to go. If you're just wondering, okay, what should I invest in? Maybe not. Investment companies is a place where you can also go. Now, usually they will even sometimes have representatives come to your home. Please be wary that sometimes investment companies and insurance companies go hand in hand, and sometimes you may be looking for investment and they might be trying to sell you insurance on the side. But investment companies can be a place. Always look for people with the heart of a teacher, that they are trying to teach you things, not just trying to sell you things, because a lot of times these people, they essentially become glorified salespeople selling advice, but the sales advice is really buy my product. Brokerages are companies that purchase and sell individual stocks, which usually involve a transaction fee, but a lot of times brokerages and investment companies go hand in hand. So you can go to a brokerage which may also be able to not just buy and sell individual stocks, but also sell you investments or mutual funds or things like that. Some investments include bonds. Bonds are really just promises. Similar to stocks, but not quite, because they're really just promises. You don't own a piece of the stock or the company or the government with a bond, but the company or government says, okay, we will lend you out. You lend us money, and we will pay back slightly more money, and that's a bond. it's just saying another way for companies and governments to raise some cash in order to move things, keep money flowing, keep products moving, etc. It's just saying, okay, if you lend us some money, we'll pay you more back. So that might look, let's say, like if I buy a $100 savings bond and we'll pay you 2% interest for the next 10 years. And so you get 2% each year. Sometimes that's compounded, sometimes that's not, depending on the nature of the bond. And at the end, you can cash it in for full value, right? It's a promise. Now, that is assuming, of course, the government or company has not gone bankrupt in the same time. A lot of people invest in what we call ETFs, or exchange traded funds. What an exchange traded fund is, it's basically a mutual fund, except the stocks are picked electronically. So if they're picked electronically, that means lower fees. Now, a lot of times they'll mirror a market index, or they'll model the entire economy, or some sort of other aspect. But the key thing here is that they are picked electronically. They are not managed by a person saying, okay, buy and sell and whatnot. It's all just done electronically because it says, hey, if this, then this. It's all just a computer program, which means much lower fees because they're not having to pay people for it to be actively involved in it. Some examples of markets include the MSCI index, which is international outside of North America, the S&P 500, Standards & Poor's, which is really the 500 largest companies in the U.S., or the TSX index, S&P TSX index, which models, I think it's about the top 200 companies in Canada. These are just some examples of things that you can wind up with mutual funds modeling, but there are, or ETFs modeling, but there is a lot more that can go into this. If you're just starting out investing, I would recommend doing some balanced ETFs, because there's low funds. You can wind up getting a broad marketplace, and this is a good place to start. I'm not saying that this is the be-all or end-all, but if you wind up using an ETF with a balance within the 3 different markets, global, US, and Canadian, the fact is that you're never really going to underperform the market. You're never going to overperform the market. You're going to go with the market, because essentially what you've done is electronically balanced yourself into the market, and can be a very advantageous way to go. Actually, before we do that, so what is a registered investment? And a registered investment is really just a type of investment in which the government is allowed to keep tabs on. Now, why would people do this? Well, essentially, there's usually some tax benefits that go with having something within a registered benefit, right? These are not actual investments. These, if you want to think about it, think of these as really filing cabinets, which you can keep investments in, right? And so if you've got one of these accounts, a registered account, essentially you can put investments in, you can take investments out, but because the government has tabs on it, there are certain rules that go with it. But an RRSP is not an investment in and of itself. It is a filing cabinet in which you can put investments in. RESPs, same thing. Tax-free savings accounts, same thing. These are simply just filing cabinets in which you can put investments in. They are not investments in and of themselves. People don't go and buy a tax-free savings account. They buy investments and open a tax-free savings account. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So let's take a look at the first one. RESPs, Registered Education Savings Plans. This basically is where parents can invest money for their children. And as the children go up, eventually the children get to school, and then they can withdraw money from the RESP, in order to, the idea is to pay for college. Right? What is the benefit of having the government keep tabs on how much you're saving for your university? Well, they do a 20% match. Okay? Now, sometimes there's even additional grants, which are usually provincial level, but the government will match 20% up to a maximum of $50,000 per kid throughout their lifetime. And this is all recorded via the social insurance number. So you cannot open up an RESP for yourself, but you can do it for your children. And perhaps many of your parents have RESPs for you already. Now, those investments continue to grow, including that 20% that the government has put in. So if I put in $100, and let's say I put in $100 into an RESP, and I'm going to invest this in a guaranteed investment certificate, a GIC, which guarantees 3% a year. Well, if I'm putting $100 in, the government also puts in 20% or $20. So instead of $100 growing at 3%, I now have 120 growing at 3%. So instantly 20% jump in value, as well as those investments continue to grow. Now, again, you can invest in GICs, you can invest in high interest savings accounts or mutual funds or individual stocks. You could potentially even in currencies or gold. Like, there's lots of possibilities of what you can actually put into this RESP. People put it in there because the government throws in 20% extra. Okay, our RSPs. Our RSPs are saved for retirement. So they're the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. Now, why do people put money in here? They do it for an income tax break. Let's give an example. Let's say here I am at 30 years old, and I make $100,000. Now, I'm just pulling up round numbers here, just for the sake. And let's say the tax on this is $35,000. Okay? But if I only made, let's say, $90,000, the tax on that becomes, let's say, $30,000. Right? Well, I don't want to just give away $10,000 to save $5,000 in tax, but if I put in $10,000 into my RRSP, I now have $10,000 worth of savings, and I pay $5,000 less in taxes. So in essence, my value has increased because of that. Now, why would the government want to do this? Well, first of all, they want people to save for retirement. But secondly, as this money grows, maybe this is worth $100,000 later. And when you're retired, you take that out. They then tax this on the 100,000, not the 10,000. So you save in taxes now, you pay more in taxes later. But that is the deal that we have with our RSPs. They're designed to save for retirement, where people get a tax break now. That money is allowed to grow, and as they pull it out, they pay at taxes. Now the person here, instead of paying $100,000 out all at the same time, let's say this grows out and I do this over 2 years at $50,000 because I don't need as much money. I would wind up paying less tax on 2 years of $50,000 than I would at 1 year of $100,000. So people are saying, well, in my big earning years, I can put money away and pay less tax later. Tax-free savings accounts are a little bit different. I'm actually not sure. I think this number may have changed. I think it might be 6,000 now. I'm not 100% sure. But tax-free savings account basically says, well, let's go back to that example where I'm paying $100,000 and I get taxed on $35,000 in tax. Well, a tax-free savings account, if I put in $10,000 into my tax-free savings account, actually I can't. So I put in, let's say, $5,000 into my tax-free savings account. I still have to pay tax on that full $100,000. I still have to pay the full $35,000 of tax this year. But this grows. Maybe this grows to $50,000. When I take it out, I do not need to pay any tax on this. No tax. It's already been paid for here. It's allowed to grow tax-free. Which is better? Typically, at the really low incomes and the really high incomes, tax-free savings accounts wind up being the way to go. Somewhere in the middle, usually RSPs, mathematically, make the most sense. And so this is, when I say low, I mean like this is like pre-income tax type level incomes. Then you get to RSPs. Eventually, RSPs wind up being to the point where they're actually not worth the tax benefit now because you're going to be growing, and you get into those higher incomes, and it's better to be investing also in tax-free savings account. Most people, if they are savings and are very diligent, will use some combination of both RSPs and tax-free savings accounts, and if they got kids, RESPs as well, and will use a combination of all three and not just one. Okay, well, what if I'm not even 18 yet? Well, you can go to any bank and investment company or brokerage and invest in their products. You can't register them until you are 18. So tax-free savings accounts, RESPs, assuming you have kids, RSPs can't be done. But you can still go to the bank and invest these companies, although some companies, they're a little bit weary of that and may require a parent signature or do it in your parent's name. If you're doing that, make sure you trust your parents for that because it is your money. However, you can actually invest in all these products. Right? Remember, RSPs, it's not an actual product. It's a portfolio. You can invest in things without having that portfolio. Same with tax-free savings accounts or RESPs. Now, one last thing that I just kind of want to mention here is education investment. And the answer is it depends. There are many fields in which a degree will not open a single door for you and should not be treated as an investment. Now, that's not to say that you don't buy it, because we buy lots of things that are not investments. Just don't treat it as an investment if it's not going to. A general studies degree in, or let's say a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 12th century interpretive dance is probably not going to open up a lot of educational lots of employment opportunities for you. Some will. An engineering degree will be an investment because that opens up to a specific job. Now, some degrees, if you're going into debt, right, if you're going to borrow for your education, please make sure it is an investment that you will actually be make sure that you will actually be seeing an increase in value of your income by going into debt. If you can pay for it, then just make the decision. Is this a personal choice? Am I doing it for my own personal benefit? Or is this an investment in myself? Okay. Now, there's lots of people who do degrees just because of personal choice. But again, some of them are not going to be would not be considered investments. Just be cautious as you choose your career whether the degree will in fact do that, especially if you are looking at this. It is not a cut and dry situation, right? But it is something you should be aware of. You do not want to be $100,000 in debt. $100,000 in debt because you went to school to get a degree that means that you would actually get paid more waitressing. If the job only pays, let's say, $20,000 a year. As opposed to the job that, let's say, pays $150,000 per year. Okay? Especially if you're borrowing money, this is one thing you are going to want to consider. Okay? Remember, it's not always about the money. You should go to college or university or post-secondary if you believe your quality of life will improve. Right? Please just don't make it hostage to your student loans. No matter what reason you're going, avoid getting into financial trouble down the road is always a good thing. Spending a whole lot of money and saying, well, I'm going to school and living a lavish lifestyle is not necessarily. You saw the budget 2Cs. It's expensive. And so you're going to want to kind of be not spending freely during those years. So, where do you start? Well, first of all, spend less than you make. If you spend less than you make, then you've got money to invest. Now, if your goal is short term, I would say use a GIC because you don't want to be losing money on it necessarily. If it is a longer term goal, use something like an ETF where the market will go up and down, and we're going to use something called dollar cost averaging. What is dollar cost averaging? Okay, well, dollar cost averaging, let's just run through a quick little example. Let's say I'm investing in a mutual fund that's selling for $10 per unit, and I invest $100 in this month. And then the price goes down to $5 per unit. I invest $100 in, and then it goes back up to $10 per unit. And I invest another $100 in. How much money have I made? Most common answer is, well, nothing. You started at 10, it went down to 5, you're up at 10. But the fact is that if you've actually invested the same amount each time, well, this got you 10 shares. This actually got you 20 shares, and this got you another 10 shares. You now have 40 units, not shares, units, at $10 each. You've made $100 because you've put in $300, and you now have $400 of value, because that's $10 each, because you bought more when it was lower. Dollar cost averaging, when the price is high, you buy less. When the price is low, you buy more, because you put the same amount in every month. So a great way to invest, especially in your early stages before you really start to learn. This is just a precursory beginning, getting started. This is not the be-all and end-all of investing by far. So, again, last things, look for money managers who will teach you and will ask you questions and answer your questions, not just try to sell you a product. And then you make informed decisions. Again, some of the best money managers will probably even refer you to somewhere else, saying, this is not a good place for you. Okay, that's it. If you got any questions, let me know.